Doug's going to stay here because, we do call this a workshop. And, we just went through a presentation, but hopefully we can be more interactive. In mine, I have a lot of questions and things like that I want you to participate in. And again, we're trying to make it a workshop, so if you have questions and things like that, please, bring them up. Okay, now what I want to do is to augment what Doug said. At ARC, we do a lot of research, as you know. That's what actually, I don't know if everybody knows what ARC stood for. When I first started with ARC, it was Automation Research Corporation. So it is all around research, market research, as well as end user research. And let me explain what that kind of research is. And I'm going to talk about this today. I kind of put together, I took little pieces of things and put it together, things that I just thought you might be interested in today. From a market research side, what we do is we do reports, and we do them on 5 different industrial cybersecurity topics. I'll mention those later, so I don't need to talk right now with them. And we sell these things, obviously, to suppliers, because the suppliers want to know what the market is, what's the size of it, who's winning, who's losing, where the opportunities are, what products people are interested in, and things like that. But we also sell them to end users, because the end users want to know, whenever they're looking at a technology, these reports tend to explain the technologies and tell them who the suppliers are. And we try to give them some insight into how they vary and things like that. From an end user research, so we do that, and we do that every year. But on end user research, we also, our goal in that case is to help end users, and we do a bunch of surveys and ad hoc data collection, I'll call it. I mean, data collection, everything from me sitting at a conference like that, listening to other people talk is data collection, just the same as doing surveys and things like that. And we provide those to our clients, our end user clients in particular, to give them kind of insight. It's on what the peers are doing and what's happening in the industry, technology-wise, as well as practice-wise, people, processes, and technology. And then we also have suppliers who are very interested in them. The suppliers are obviously interested because they're always wondering, what does the user want? What is the user interested in? Things like that. So I'm going to talk to you about both market research and user research. Now, before I do that, let me frame something here. This is a model you've probably, I'm sure many of you have seen it before. If you've been at our forum, you know our model. This we call our industrial cybersecurity maturity model. It's not at all like any other maturity model you ever saw, because the intent is different. So please don't tell me how I did it wrong. I did something different. Maybe I chose the wrong word. But the idea of this is we just took technologies, on the left is the level of protection, risk management in this case, and on the right is program maturity. And what we found, we made an analogy with like protecting your home. I happen to have been someone that was burglarized one time. My home was burglarized. And after that happened, we didn't lock our doors, we didn't do lots of things, and we got burglarized. And after that, we locked our doors. But if you could imagine, at that time, I ran out and I bought an alarm system, the fanciest one you could get at that time. This was quite a long time ago. And then we never used it. And the reason we didn't use it was because we still didn't lock our doors, we didn't do lots of things. So this model was constructed more from the point of view of what should you do first? We use this when we do consulting with companies, And the first thing is we say secure. This is our terminology. All the terminology is similar to what you see in cybersecurity. We call it secure, defend, contain, monitor, and manage. And what secure is simply locking your doors, doing those basic things, harden your devices, do the things that are cheap to do, but you can do. Just the basics. Again, firewalls are good. They'll stop things, but if you don't protect your PC as well, if you don't protect the endpoint, once it gets through the firewall, it's going to get into the endpoint, or somebody walks in with a stick or something like that. So first thing is just to secure it. Think of it as locking the doors. The next thing is you defend it. Now, defending it would be firewalls and things like that. And it would be like putting in an alarm system, I guess. And then some people will be perfectly happy and say, I feel comfortable with that. In my case, apparently my wife was happy with just secure. In the end, we do lock our doors now. But then if some people will be happy if they just put in firewalls. Other people will say, that's not quite good enough. I want to break down and I want to do a little more containment, because if something still gets in, I think it's better. I for one, kind of believe it doesn't matter what you do, you still have to think that your defenses will be penetrated. Could be, if somebody was that intent on attacking you. But if they do get in, you at least want to contain them. So, you might do something special to put in zone firewalls and things like that. If you're happy with that, you stop. If you're not happy, you go up and you put in something to monitor systems. That's something that's happening a lot today. I think it's very positive to say, I don't care what I put in to stop things from causing problems, I'm still going to monitor to see if something got in there. And then the very last thing we call manage. And manage, you have to do in any case, but it's a question of how much it is done by you versus maybe a contractor or another service, because that's where you do things like incident management. You certainly have to do that type of stuff yourself, but also things like remediating the system, doing the forensics and stuff like that. Anyhow, so you can see as it goes across, the idea is it's a question of giving you more and more security. It's not layers of defense, but in a conceptual way, it might be thought of that way. Now, the important thing, and that's not maturity. Maturity is whether you do that. But if you go across the top, those are the resources that are needed to support the technology that is below it. And the point we make many times with people, as well as the processes, you'll see I say cybersecurity management processes, and above that I have people listed. And the very first things you can do, you can ask your ICS vendor to say, please harden all my devices. They can do that for you. You don't need experts in your plan. If all you're going to do is put in firewalls and stuff like that, you need someone that understands those. You need somebody that can do a little bit of stuff to maintain profiles and things like that. But as you go across that technology, you'll find you need more and more sophisticated cybersecurity experts to maintain that system. And one of the premises we use in this model for years is we tell people, if you're buying technology like it's level 5, if you're running out or 4 or 5, but the only people you have to maintain it is a plant engineer who's busy doing 100 other things, you're just wasting your money, just like I wasted my money when I bought my alarm system, okay? So we use that, and that's what the maturity is. Maturity is where you are in each of those things, and our message has been for years, match your investments with your maturity. Don't ignore the top. Don't just go and buy technology. You're not going to solve it. You have to keep the top level, the people and the processes in place with the technology investments, okay? So that's our general model. Now, the reason I mention this is because this kind of drives a lot of our research. Like when I talk about our market research, we study all the products that you see in that, on the technology, on the steps. I think I have people, processes, and technology. I should have hit that before. But so our market research is very much around technology. Our user research is more around people and processes. Though they overlap sometimes because we also do, so we do it on endpoint protection systems, network security solutions. We do it on OT, threat detection and response, which we used to call anomaly and breach detection. We do it on cybersecurity management processes or systems, which support the top processes. And we also do it on services, which is on the top. That's our market research. And our user research, we ask questions, people, what are you doing with respect to your people? Where do you stand and things like that? So that's our research. Now let me go over some of the results and what I can share with you. First of all, market research. Now, as I mentioned, we do market research on 5 categories: endpoint protection, network security, cybersecurity management, OT, threat detection and response, and industrial cybersecurity services. And this market research, what we do in market research is we try to estimate the size of the market, what the growth opportunities in the market are, how it varies by region, by vertical industry, and things like that. And we try to help people in our reports by saying these are the major suppliers, this is where they fit into the market and stuff like that. And we just recently did an update on that. And here's some just basic numbers. Obviously, I can't give you all the numbers to all of our studies. That is a business for us to sell those. But what I can share, I felt comfortable to share, is because I find there's a lot of numbers out there. I deal with them all the time. I'll walk in someone and say, oh yeah, the industrial cybersecurity market is $50 billion. And I'll say, I don't think so. But anyhow, our numbers, we think the market for industrial cybersecurity products, those ones I just mentioned, products and services, is around $3 billion a year. And it's growing very good, though. It's growing at 14.3%, which is very good for in our industry. I mean, you look at some things like PLCs and DCS systems. I don't know the growth this year, but it's probably in the 5% range, something like that. I mean, that's kind of a good market. So 14.3 is a very good market. The major industries are, but it kind of aligns with the picture Doug had, actually. If you look at how his investments are done in education, it almost aligned the same. I mean, power is the big one, both generation and T&D, oil and gas, chemicals and petrochemicals, and other kinds of critical infrastructure we see. Now, one that keeps popping up and I'd be interested in is automotive. And I get confused with that sometimes because part of automotive is protecting the car. The other part of automotive is protecting the plants. I struggle sometimes to be able to get people to separate those two for me. Certainly a lot on driverless cars, you know. And the major regions for the market's the biggest actually in Europe and the Middle East, followed by North America, and then by Asia. And if you look at the shares, you'll see the two major areas, the biggest product categories are network security solutions and endpoint security solutions. You can imagine there's an awful lot of anti-malware software sold, as well as firewalls. There's less of the others. It's not, I mean, again, that pie's $3 billion, so it's still a good market for those other, it's a good opportunity for the other people. So that's what I wanted to tell you about the markets. I'm not trying to sell you the studies here, but wanted to share that with you. Often we just show a chart with no numbers on it, so. I don't know if you consider yourself lucky, but I shared more than my boss may have wanted me to. He's sitting in the audience right there, staring at me. Anyhow, so that's from a market research perspective. And so the key point, though, I think, is it is a good market if you're a supplier and you're into it. It is something that people are addressing. One thing I take out of it, like Doug, you know, extracts something saying, what does this tell me? Well, what this tells me, too, is people are investing in protecting their plants. I go to lots of conferences, and you know, I hear lots of people saying, oh, first they say these OT people don't understand anything about cybersecurity, they're naive, they don't use those words, but that's what they're implying, and they're not doing anything. And the reality is we see something different. These are responsible people and trying to be responsible, but they have certain constraints. Now let me talk about end user research. Now, this one, we just ran 3 surveys, and I'm going to ask you, they're active right now, and I didn't have enough data from any of them to really be able to say, here's the final results. I was hoping to have that by now, but we never got that. We didn't get them launched in time, or was a lot of reasons. But what I did do is, if you look on the forum app, which again, I highly recommend you download, if you look at the description of this session, you'll see 3 links for those surveys. And so I really would encourage, I ask, you know, I'm not pleading, but I'm asking if you would please take it. We would appreciate it. And also, you get a report in the end, so you can find out what your peers are doing and stuff like that. So please take a look at that. There's 3 different surveys. One is on, at the bottom here, industrial OT, cybersecurity, which is similar to the one that Doug is running. So in a way, maybe we're competing, but I'm sure we're complementary in our questions. We have one on IT, OT, cybersecurity convergence, and we have one on industrial IoT, cybersecurity. And if you notice, those are hot topics today, and you're going to see, if you look at the forum agenda here and the workshop agenda and what I mentioned earlier, we have sessions on all those topics. The other part that I should have mentioned was around our user research. Again, we do it through web surveys, but we do it through a lot of just networking with our clients, ad hoc discussions with people. That's kind of our job, to learn. And then we kind of have to distill that in our minds and tell you what we see in the market or in the industry with respect to that. So now, let me talk about the very first one, is the state of industrial cybersecurity, or ICS cybersecurity more specifically. And this is my little ARC cybersecurity maturity model. And before I show you where the results are, now what I'm going to show you is results. We've run surveys in this for probably 5 years now. And they're rather consistent. I mean, we didn't get a lot of response to the last one so far, but I kind of could tell you where the numbers, where things are going to fall. So what I want to tell you is where we have seen the state of cybersecurity, industrial cybersecurity. But before I do that, I would just like to do a little research here myself for a moment. And so I just want to ask you, for those 3 areas of people, process, and technology, I don't want to click, because if I click, I might show you the answer. But anyhow, remember, the top is people, then process, and technology. But with respect to your technology investments, how many people here would say that they're at level 1 there, meaning that they have done essentially nothing but harden their devices? Many? How about level 2? Okay, there's a couple there that have done basics. They've put in firewalls and stuff like that. What about level 3, where you've done more extensive, more like a 62334, 443 type of standard where you're zoning and stuff like that? Okay. What about the 4th level? How many people are at 4? Okay, not a lot of hands going up, so the rest of you, I don't believe the rest of you are at all at 5. That'd be absolutely shocked. Well, we don't have to worry then, I can tell you if you are. So anyhow, but from a technology, I would say it's about a 3, was the one I saw the most hands with there, around 3. And what about from the people perspective? How many people are running their cybersecurity management, managing their cybersecurity with just part-time ICS engineers in their plant engineers, people that are managing the OT systems? Yeah, I was going to have you take notes, but I didn't ask, so I can't complain. Okay, how many of you have a part-time, an IT people in the plant, or full-time, some full-time people in your plant, maybe they're auto engineers, maybe they're IT people, who are managing your cybersecurity? Okay, I think that's higher. How many of you have a full-time, and maybe that's what I just asked was the full-time. How many of you have like a SOC, Security Operations Center, or a corporate type of program where you have corporate resources? Okay. So I would say most people are around in between the part-time and full-time up there. That's where I would say. Again, there weren't that many answers. But that's where we think the world is. If you look, most people, the line on the right would be ideal. You would have bought everything, you would have invested everything, you got all the people you need, which I can't imagine anybody could do, but anyhow, you have all the people you need. We find that most people from a technology perspective are down in between 3 and 4. Obviously, there's a lot of people piloting the monitoring type solutions today, the anomaly and breach detection or OT threat detection response. So if you see the actual technology, that's the second bar to the left, the second arrow, there's a gap. And that gap is in technology. It could be right in some cases. Everybody doesn't need to have the ultimate security. There's some point where you balance your risk with your investments, right? Your risk tolerance with what the risks are. But the sad part is we see to the left there, most plants are running still with just part-time people trying to maintain their cybersecurity. And that creates what we call a resource gap. They don't even have the people, maturity-wise, to manage the technology that they have. And the bad thing we see with that, what happens, a lot of times when I tell people this, they'll look at that and say, okay, that means our technology is only at level 2, okay? But because that's where the resources are. But the reality is actually all that technology is being undermined. When you don't have people to take care of stuff, everything kind of suffers. You don't do patching, you don't do updates, you don't manage profiles, you don't manage user credentials, you don't manage lots of things because the people just are overwhelmed. They just don't have it to do it. So this is where we see the world today. And so there's this resource gap and there's a technology gap. The biggest one that we think is important is to close the resource gap, because the resource gap is really undermining, like I just said, the current security of all your technologies, your whole plan. And it also is preventing you from doing more security. If you think you need more security, again, you don't go and buy the ultra security system, home security system, when you can't even close your doors, okay? So there's lots of ways that people can improve it. We say we should first tell people, well, why don't you triage what you got to do? At least focus on doing the things that are most important first. Use the resources you have as best you can. Then look into training and hiring. Now, I don't know many companies out there that just go out and hire people casually these days, or say, I want to hire more cybersecurity people. I think it's important if you can, but there also are not many of those people. And then the other thing is to invest in tools to help you manage your cybersecurity. But in the end, we still think most companies are going to have to go outside and get resources. I'm talking about from the plant perspective right now. And there's different places you can get that. One of them is this thing of IT, OT, cybersecurity convergence, which we think is a good positive approach to that, using the resources in your company to maximize it. Another one is to go to third parties, which can do the same thing for you in a sense, if you want to work that closely. I just think the relationship is different. There's a lot of other issues with that. So, but generally, you have to go outside. So that's the number one issue. And then the number two issue is I mentioned the thing about the technology gap, but another thing that's happening that I think is a big problem today that Doug mentioned in his slide, and you'll see in our sessions, is the world is changing. The technology is changing dramatically today. Even for those people who say, I don't want to change my plant, they can't not change their plant because the technology itself is changing. New solutions you buy are built to be much more interconnected. We're shifting a lot of company suppliers, but again, when you adopt it, you're going to end up using it. A lot of companies are shifting their apps to the clouds. These are apps that are used within the control systems, not critical ones, but certain ones will shift out there. Advanced process control, for example, could easily probably be done in the cloud. Analytics in the cloud. A lot more data transfer into the cloud. So this is creating a big challenge for lots of people. Now, when we started talking about, I will mention it later, but the IoT, industrial IoT, when I first started talking about it, and maybe it was just my mentality, but I kind of thought of that as just adding new devices into plants. And I come from the steel industry, and they have lots of devices in plants already. And I didn't get it, to be honest. But actually, it's much broader than that. Some of the things that are happening today that you'll see later, we call it digital transformation, but it's much more connecting with existing data stores, connecting with existing devices in plants, making things more connected. So it's a big issue. And people have to deal with that, and that was one of the other surveys that we did. And again, that's okay, that's it. So now what I want to do, so that was just on the state in general cybersecurity. Now I want to talk about IT/OT cybersecurity convergence. That's one of my pet ones. I really like that topic. And I'm going to show you, first let me give you some background, frame it for you. Hopefully I don't have these slides in the afternoon too. We have a session on it, but you may see them again if you come to my session. That's really encouraging you to come, isn't it? You'll get to hear me say the same thing again. I'm a real salesman, Doug. But anyhow, one thing that's happening, and I wanted to clarify this because of our terminology, and at this conference, you'll see a lot of people talking about IT/OT convergence. And that indeed is happening. There's a lot of things driving IT/OT convergence. You know, the digital transformation programs, this enormous shift towards analytics, machine learning, AI type solutions, changes in the technology itself. If you look at the changes that are occurring within the control systems, they are becoming much more IT-ish type solutions, particularly when you look at like the open forum, open process automation platform type stuff is much more IT-ish. So in that case, people in the OT world need a little more IT expertise. So you need more IT people, or you need to train or do something. But at the same time, the people in the IT world need more support from OT people because they're being asked to get more data. They don't know where the data is. They don't know how to connect to the data. There's all kinds of issues of connectivity to get the data. It's simple to say to an IT. A lot of these programs are being driven by IT is what we find. But anyhow, so that's kind of bringing those two groups together and driving what was called an IT/OT convergence. Now, that's wonderful. And that indeed is happening, and hopefully there'll be business benefits from it and more efficient use of resources. I'm not talking about that per se. I'm talking about IT/OT cybersecurity convergence, which you'll see, if you blink, you won't know I just changed the picture. It's basically the same thing. I mean, except right now we have an IT cybersecurity group. There's also OT cybersecurity groups. Quite different in many companies. But what's happening is because of a lot of things because of a lot of threats that have happened like WannaCry, we see a lot more push by IT groups being told you're responsible for security everywhere. So they have this real drive to find out more information from OT. the OT people often think they want to take control of it. I don't know if that's true or not. I don't think in many cases. They do want to know what's the status and make sure things are being managed properly. And then, of course, when somebody asks you questions like that, if they don't think it is, then they'll offer their advice. And so in a way, I guess that does get involved. At the same time, you have done on the OT side, I just mentioned to you, and it's the same thing Doug was talking about before. We all know what to do. There's no surprise about that. The standards are there. The technology is certainly there to secure yourself. The big problem is we don't have the people to do it. And again, one place to get those people is to leverage your internal resources. So that's driving. So in the end, when I talk, remember, I'm just saying IT, OT, cybersecurity convergence. It could be one big program, that and IT, OT convergence, but I just want to be clear what I'm talking about. Now, with respect to that, whenever I talk to companies who are doing that or are trying to do that or talking about doing that, most of them are using a model like this, where there's three major elements. You know, there's an IT security operations team, which is the ones responsible for maintaining security of the IT systems. There's an OT operations security team. I probably should have said security there. Who's responsible for managing security in the plants. If you have it, it could be that one guy or it could be a team. And then you have a SOC or something within the organization, which could be when I say the word SOC, it could be a virtual thing. It doesn't have to be a physical place. You know, one of the rooms with all the monitors and everything else. It could be a corporate group that provides support on some escalated way and stuff like that. But most of them see that as kind of the model. Somehow we have to bring those together with the objective, and the poor CISO is in the middle. You know, so it depends on what their role is, but they usually are the ones get yelled at and have to deal with all this. Maybe sometimes they have the control, sometimes they don't. And the key objectives is to find some way to share, it's shared responsibility for the end-to-end cybersecurity of all the business processes. Also, most companies want some global corporate governance of all the cybersecurity policies, procedures, technology guidelines. And big thing is they want global visibility of what the state of cybersecurity is in their plants. And of course, the key challenges are things like there's a lot of cultural issues, technical issues, process constraints. When I say that, I mean constraints on how you can patch. That's one reason a lot of people don't patch. You can't shut it down to patch. It's not like my PC. Literally this morning, I got an update in my PC when I was doing something. And there's just different views on how that organization should be managed. So anyhow, we see that as the model that's happening. Now let me ask a question, a little more research here. How many of you in your companies already have an IT, OT, cybersecurity converged program? Anybody? Oh, there are some. Oh, actually quite a few in the back there. Whoever that is in the back, good company. How many of you are actively looking at that? Okay, good. See that, Doug? That justifies the program we put together then. That's good. That's very good. Thank you. So now let me show you, I think in this slide we'll do it. Yeah. Here's something, that was very interesting feedback. Just last week, this is a little tedious in a way, but I saw this blog. This was on Thursday, I think I sent you the thing, thanking Doug and Sands thing for a godsend of sending me this. I wanted something. But what it was is someone posted, Paul, I can't say his full name or I wouldn't say it, but Paul posted a question on the SANS blog. By the way, if you're not familiar, there's a SANS ICS community, and they have I don't know if you call it a blog or not, a forum. But people who belong to it, anybody can join it. You go and you can ask questions. And it is really very effective, I find. I've connected to it. I don't ask many questions, but I watch the answers a lot, and I can really see what's happening. But this was a very interesting one, because Paul asked the question. He said, look, I'm looking for anyone experienced in having IT and ICS teams using the same internal support and security structure, which is, to me, IT, OT, cybersecurity convergence. Currently, we have an IT group based mostly in our corporate office that has a service desk, app teams, infrastructure team, and security team. Our ICS environments are supported by a local person who I think is great, or they are great, with ICS equipment and systems, but they may not have the depth of experience or knowledge on things like routing, servers, or VMware. which some of the ICS vendors we have are recommending for their systems. So in that you see all the things I was just talking about. There's changes to the systems happening. They don't have the expertise. Many of them times they don't have the time either because they have other duties. So it says, we've been discussing leveraging our service desk, infrastructure team, and security team to help them out with the things they are good at already, but are wondering how other companies may have dealt with that. We are also looking at the reporting structure and having those ICS people report to a CIO type position rather than an engineering or operations person. Okay? Now he's asking about the organization. Excellent question. It was just a perfect question. So what I did, and I'm not going to read them all, but I went through here. There you go. Here's the first comment. I mean, it was funny because I got the email saying this was there, and I think I noticed it very quickly. And by the time I opened it up, there were like 4 responses. So it really showed how helpful. I love that. When you talk about information sharing, I mean, it isn't threat information, but it's information sharing. Very, very good. But anyhow, somebody said, Paul, similar situation here. However, our cyber group is the lead, but we will leverage internal IT staff when applicable. Some of our programs already have dedicated IT staff, but lack all the technical depth in some areas. Little steps at time as we mature. I too will be interested in following this thread. Okay, so this shows there's a lot of interest there. Then I have all these others. I don't want to bore you. I was very interested. The other 4 comments, I did them in different colors, but anyhow, here's another one. It says, hi, Paul, that's what we do here. I'm the de facto ICS guy responsible for security operations and integrations of non-IT on the corporate network. I'm an ad hoc member of that InfoSec team and am governed by the same set of policies and so on. So he's kind of describing that they already do it, how they're doing it, and stuff like that. Okay? So there's somebody else said, great question, Paul. I just love these. I highly recommend you go there. And you can look up this thread, actually. You can read all the comments. They were very good. I like this one here. I could write a book on this topic. But my point is that it's completely possible, and I feel the best possible. I think that's the same fellow, though, by the way, that said we should be run by the OT group. You can't read that one, I guess, because of the colors. And then, so there's a bunch of responses, and then at the very end, Paul answers, says, thanks, everyone, for your wonderful insights. It's nice to know we're not breaking new ground here, and other companies have had the same discussions and concerns. As we're just at the beginning of this journey, I'm seeing a lot of the same themes that are mentioned above, which were all these themes, and hopefully we could avoid some of the trouble spots. One last question, how important was it to get C-level executive buy-in? So he then drives it for another question, and then there was another round of responses. So anyhow, it was really good. Rather than me read it to you, it's much better, I suggest you go there and look at it. Doug will be happy to tell you the link to that. I don't remember it, I'm sorry. Now, the things that I found interesting about this, though, there were a bunch of common questions. First one's, what are the challenges? What is I want to do this, I want to converge, but what do I have to look out for, number one? And what can I do to overcome those things you're going to tell me are problems? And number 2 is, how should the program be structured and managed? That seems to be a very important question. And how should responsibilities be divided? So before I think I already asked you this question. I put this in the slide to remind me to do that little poll I just did with you about who's doing what and how many programs you have and so on. But here's the data from our survey, and as I mentioned, this one is still open, and actually it's very preliminary results, and I think you will get a sense of the kind of people who responded when I show you what the responses were. Those are the responses to some questions. The first question is, well, this was more about what is your interest in OT, IT, OT, cybersecurity convergence? What are the factors that are driving you towards that? The first one is more OT. OT is concerned about attacks through connections with the IT systems. Somebody says concern about end-to-end security of critical business processes, which is one of the ones I did. And way down at the bottom, what surprised me, if you look, was it says need to fill expertise gaps in the IT group. No, need to fill OT expertise gaps in the IT group, saying the IT people need some help from OT. Notice it's the lowest one. This one up at the top is primarily an OT concern. If you see the others are more IT concerned, I'll be frank with you, the group was pretty much mostly OT people. Obviously, that's a big audience for ARC. So they see the world from their perspective, which I think is perfectly fine, but I just find it interesting. Like I said, many people say, well, yeah, we can use your help, but you're going to have to work with us. We're going to take care, we're going to manage everything. And maybe that's right for different cases. I don't know. They aren't saying, can you please come in and help us and teach us how you do it, or can we adopt your practices? It's more like, no, we need your expertise, but you got to do what we want to do. So, and this one to fill resource gaps, need to fill OT resource gaps. I was surprised that was low, given what I was showing you before. But I think that my explanation for that is just the fact that right now the people who answered, they have old legacy OT systems. And many times they'll say, we know how to maintain those systems. Don't worry, we can take care of what we have. They're not thinking about the fact that next system they get or when they get a replacement, it's going to be more connected and stuff like that. Another question we asked had to do with what benefits you expect to get. And if you look, it's like in just two major chunks there. The first one was, what kind of benefits do you expect to get? And it had to do with better visibility, better management of cyber threats, better management of cybersecurity vulnerabilities. Everybody agreed with that. That's one thing they're trying to get and they expect to get. The thing they didn't expect to get, which surprised me, was they didn't expect that it would be better use of all their resources, which I would have thought was one of the main things. Of course, that's something I focus on. They also didn't think it would reduce the cost, and they didn't think it would reduce the portfolio, which maybe that's true. I would like to learn more about that if that's true, if they don't think they can leverage solutions across both IT and OT. It's some solutions, obviously not all of them, but some of them. Now, this was another question, because if you remember one of the issues that came up, and I think a big issue, again, it's one of my pet things, is the IT-OT convergence. And one of the key issues that comes up in that is how do we manage this? And who's responsible for what? Given that model that I showed you before where you have an IT team, an OT team, and a SOC, who's supposed to be responsible for what? This, I think, didn't help me with my survey, to be honest, the structure of this. I made a RACI chart. If you're all familiar with RACI charts, responsibility, accountability, consulted, and informed. And I tried to get people to tell me what they would do for different, who would manage the resources. The top one is a resource issue. The next one was a governance issue. At the top, who should be managing the SOC? Who should be managing the corporate IT resources? Who should be managing the corporate OT? But when it got down to things like program governance, cyber risk assessments and audits, security process development, security technology selection, awareness training, and things like that, there are processes. And then at the bottom, it had to do with who should be the one selecting the technologies, who should be involved, who should manage that. This is really questions of who should be responsible or accountable. And then things like, one that was real important to me was who should be responsible for threat detection and response. That's a big issue, I find. Anyhow, I was going to do a little quiz here with you, but we don't really have the time. And I think it would be a little tedious anyhow. But here's the way we got the data so far. It's a heat map. So the red are the ones that say most people said this is the word they picked. So in the top left, 37% of the people who responded said, we think the Security Operations Center should be managed by the CISO. 35 said the CIO. That all made sense to me. None of them said it should be managed by the OT people. Corporate IT, same kind of breakdown. Plant IT noticed, I was surprised actually that so many said they could be managed by the CISO, by CIO or CISO. I would have thought, I expected, given the nature of the group that responded so far, that it would be saying, no, we don't want them managing us. But they at least saw that as a converged program that should be managed, integrated in that way. That's the plant IT, though. Let me correct myself. It's the plant IT, not the OT. The OT people are going to be managed by the plant or by the OT group, by an automation manager. The one that found, anyhow, you can look at the slides whenever we publish them, but As I mentioned, we have only had a certain level of response. I really need more IT input into that, I think, to get a better picture of where the world is. Because most of the people that responded so far are from an OT background. I'm trying to really get a lot more IT people. Okay, so, did you want to, Anna, I saw you take a picture there. Go ahead. Okay. Okay, so that's all the data I wanted to present. We have, we produce lots of reports and stuff, but I just tried to pick things to augment what Doug had said. Now I just want to close this because just so you know, after this session, there's coffee out there, I presume, and things like that. It's a coffee break for half an hour. We were a little bit early. We got 10 minutes to go, so if anybody wants to ask a question, that's fine. Before you do that, though, let me just, because I want to frame stuff for you. Here's a map I put together of, remember the first thing I showed you was all the programs we have? The top green is the workshop today. The blue are sessions during the week. And if you're interested, what I did here, just to kind of frame, because of the speakers we have and things like that that I know of, I mean, I'm the one that was managing those. If you're interested in ICS, OT, cybersecurity, where'd it go? There you go. See where the ones are? I highly recommend you go to all those sessions. All those sessions will touch on, now when I say ICS, OT, I'm talking about, IEC 62443 type of discussions around plants, SCADA systems, that type of stuff. If you're interested, so again, I don't know if you can see these, can't see these presentations too much. I don't want to sit here and list every session. I know I do a lot of that as it is. But anyhow, that's for that one session, so I'll give you a moment to look at that. If you're interested in IIoT cybersecurity, some of these will overlap, by the way, but notice it's a different set of sessions. Like the next session we have, Eric Kosman is going to be moderating and leading a panel discussion, presentation and panel discussion about trends and developments in ICS cybersecurity development trends, but it's going to talk about standards as well as other developments of what's happening within plant security systems. Eric's going to be in this room, right, Eric? Track 1. Or are you in track 2? You're in track 1. I'm going to be on the other side of the room, on the other side of the wall that'll be here, and I'll be talking more about ITOT. IIoT cybersecurity trends and developments. What's happening with respect to that? I'm not going to compete with Eric. I could sit up here, since I have the floor, I guess I could promote mine over Eric's. I would go to mine. But I don't want to. I wouldn't do that. Yeah, take a survey, yeah. I don't know, it would be interesting, huh? It'd be interesting. Anyhow, so that's where the IIoT stuff will be. Here's on information sharing. I put that in because Doug had brought that up, and I think that's a very meaningful thing. And the place I think that's going to be discussed at our forum, I think that is a very important topic, but it's going to be mostly discussed in the next 2 sessions because there's a lot of information sharing around standards and standard developments and stuff like that. If you're interested in cyber risk management, we've done something very interesting this year. We have a couple that, we have a focus, one of the several sessions are around cybersecurity and safety convergence, so we kind of encapsulated all under the idea of risk management, which I think is a very interesting session. Another session that I think is going to be very interesting is one we have on Wednesday at 2 o'clock, and Eric's going to be moderating that, and it's on balancing. We have a lot of clients that are saying, yeah, I'm very concerned about security, I'm very concerned about safety, but I also have to innovate. How do I balance all of those risks? I mean, we know that you have risks of threats, of cyber attacks, but you also have risks if you don't do something to upgrade your systems. So how do you balance that? So we have a really good panel of people that'll be talking about that. And then the last thing is ITOT cybersecurity convergence, and I'll promote that because that's one I'm moderating, but all those sessions. I threw in OT threat detection and response in that too, because I think it overlaps into IT and OT. I think it's where you see those merging today. So that's the session this afternoon that I'll be moderating on this side in track 1. Then we have a panel discussion on IT, OT, cybersecurity convergence itself, which we have a really good group because we have 3 people who are CISOs, and we have 3 people who more come from the engineering automation world on the panel. And it's not intended to be a battle by any means. It's intended to say, what are the issues? How are you dealing with it? They're all dealing with IT, OT, cybersecurity convergence in some way. So I think it'll be very, very helpful, very interesting session. And then tomorrow morning, or tomorrow at 2 o'clock? Yes, tomorrow at 2 o'clock, we have a session. It's called Case Studies Part 1. I'm going to promote it because I'm moderating it. Oh, I'm moderating Part 2 as well. But that one in particular, we have, again, these three people who are CISOs are going to be talking about the programs they're using. This is at Rockwell, Kohler, and Versum Materials. So anyhow, that's an overview of what we are. I think we're done anyhow. I think we ended up finding a way to use an hour and a half even without DHS. Yeah, are there any questions?
I got a microphone here. So.
Over here, Larry. Yeah, for Doug or me or whoever.
Should be live. So.
Good morning, I'm John Cooley from Procter & Gamble. At these types of sessions, you're supposed to start off and scare the hell out of us, reciting recent breaches of security into manufacturing control systems and the like. Can you share any data from last year or recently on actual intrusions, loss of production in manufacturing operations? Of course, in the newspaper you hear all about credit card companies getting card numbers stolen and retail operations being hacked, that kind of thing. But what can you share about controls?
That's what I was, normally that's what DHS would help with because they get them reported, at least they report on the incidents they get. I don't know of any major ones outside of WannaCry and NotPetya, which really caused major problems. Not really through the plant as much as through the IT systems and the loss of them, which really kind of reiterates how they're connected, connectivity between.
Is this on?
Here, come up here.
Yeah. That was
He's
good
okay.
secret. I've
okay,
moved.
Andrew.
So first of all, do you have something that you want to share with the group? No? Darn. Okay. So I think one of the more significant, more recent events is around safety integrated systems. It was an event called Triton or Trisis. That was the name that was given to the attack. Incident itself focused on the energy sector, oil and gas specifically. What's significant about that event that happened within the last 12 months, I apologize, I don't have something that's truly recent within the last few weeks here. What's significant about that is it reminds us that our standard control systems and the safety instrumented systems and all the mechanical overrides that historically have been separated, now we see that level of integration. And from an attacker's standpoint, we've created a very convenient playing field for an attacker once they gain access to one portion of a system to be able to build intelligence, actually affect operation. In the case of a safety system, we know what the outcome can be. We know why we have SIS systems in place is because critical operations and the consequences and impact. So, you know, from a specific data standpoint, I would encourage you check out this Triton Trisis event that happened within the last 12 months. There's a tremendous amount to be learned about protecting assets, protecting people. And the watershed moment is that it's the first public indication that we have where we actually have an appreciation for the attacker's motivation. That motivation being to disrupt, damage, or potentially cause destruction. So that is a direct contrast to some of the previous types of incidents that we've seen in industry. Yes, power has gone off and that has cascading consequences, but affecting a safety instrumented system, it becomes pretty clear why somebody would be compelled to take action and the consequences that they're looking for. So we'll come prepared next year with more recent information. And I also expect that in upcoming sessions today, you're going to hear some of those data points come out. Great question, though.
No, I assumed you knew that one, but maybe not. I apologize. Another thing, though, that we see, I mean, I personally would recommend be concerned about, is there's a lot of news I see reporting. You don't hear of many incidents. You know, all of a sudden a plant blew up or a plant shut down or anything like that. What you know, though, is these studies are saying things like some foreign nations have infiltrated certain plants to steal information, particularly in order that, you know, to understand if someone really wanted to cause a power problem, you know, first thing is you have to get into the plant and steal the information about the design of the plant and things like that. It's not just a cybersecurity issue. It's not just getting malware in. If you get in, you then have to know what you're going to do with it. So there's an awful lot of that being reported in the news. But again, it's not an incident. It's not like something that exciting or that dramatic. It's that people are doing infiltration. This was more the intelligence reports recently that we've just heard. And you see the same thing in our news. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Good morning. I'm Hugh Arif from AT&T Manufacturing Solutions. On the topic of IT-OT convergence, a very, very new trend is something called well, edge computing you've heard of, but more recently, multi-access edge computing, or MEC. And what that enables is containing your data based on policies that you can set in the MEC for either creating a localized cellular within the plant or containing your data to the WAN so that the effects of any intrusions from IT systems or internet are minimized. Are you seeing anything, any discussion on this segregation of data using this MAC to your cybersecurity threats?
I don't know this term. I'm sorry, I don't even know the term MAC.
Okay.
I mean, there's other MACs like MAC address, but
it's
that
MAC.
specific term, certainly we're seeing edge devices. There's a lot more being done with edge devices, analytics in edge devices, moving analytics back into the plants. I mean, everybody said, let's go all to the cloud. Now there's talk about going the other way. That's not my specific area at ARC. We have people that follow that, that are in analytics. And more, if you're interested in that, I would suggest you attend some of our digital transformation kind of sessions, because I'm sure it'll be talked about there. Again, but no, I don't see that specific thing being there.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Sid, if I may.
Maybe Doug?
If I may just add briefly, I mean, I think what you're hitting on is this change in where the perimeter actually is for the factory, so to speak. It used to be bounded by the four walls, but the movement of virtualizing, of bringing cloud infrastructure, and that is mainstream. I presume that many, if not most of you, have some element of off-premise storage for configuration, for data collection, and potentially even the control element. And I think that may be what you're hitting upon, is that the perimeter has moved, and we are either relying on a new infrastructure that we have control of on-premise, or more and more, it's that off-premise using public infrastructures that have to be managed, which can give us a lot of power too, because done properly, of course, we have the ability of being more selective with authorizing the privileges that are provided, done properly. So,
I think we have to, I don't know if there's more questions, but we have to give the people time to split the room, as I mentioned. So I think we've got to end this session. Again, there's coffee and maybe some food out there. I don't know what's out there. So anyhow, see you back in a half hour. Thank you. Here, I was going to applaud myself. Thank you.